Dr. Emma Mitchell pressed her hand against the crystalline wall, feeling the subtle vibration that none of their instruments could detect. After 3 years of excavating in Valles Marineris, she'd finally found something that made her doctorate in xenorchaeology worth every sleepless night and every grant rejection. "It's warm," she announced to her team, her voice echoing through their sealed helmets. The other 5 members of the human expedition gathered around, their headlamps cutting through the rust-colored dust that hung in the thin Martian atmosphere of the pressurized tunnel. Dr. James Cooper, the team's materials expert, pulled out their most basic tool, a $20 infrared thermometer, the kind you could buy at any hardware store back on Earth. +4 Celsius, he reported, wonder in his voice. In a cave that should be -60. Their more advanced equipment had failed the moment they'd breached this chamber, just like the alien survey team's technology had been failing on Mars for the past decade. But these simple human tools, based on principles centuries old, worked perfectly. The wall before them stretched up into darkness, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Unlike the dead ruins found elsewhere in the solar system, this place hummed with dormant energy. Emma could feel it in her bones, like standing too close to a speaker playing bass notes too deep to hear. "Control, are you getting this?" she asked through the comm channel. "Affirmative," replied Mission Director Hernandez. "The collective's representatives are expressing concerns." Emma smiled slightly. Of course they were. The advanced alien species that made up the collective had been trying to access predecessor sites like this for millennia. Their frustration at watching a human team succeed where they'd failed must be immense. "Tell them we're continuing as planned," she said, then switched to the local channel. "Mike, how's that door looking?" Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez, their security officer and engineering specialist, was already running his fingers along the seams of what appeared to be an entrance. "It's not like any predecessor tech I've studied," he said. "The metal, if it is metal, feels almost organic. And there's something else." He trailed off, pressing his palm flat against the surface. The door responded. Geometric patterns lit up beneath his hand, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Colors that had no business existing in the infrared spectrum danced across the surface. The team stepped back, but Emma moved forward, her scientific training warring with an almost magnetic pull she felt from the structure. "Dr. Mitchell," Rodriguez started, but she'd already placed her hand next to his. The light show intensified. The humming in her bones grew stronger, and for a brief moment, she could have sworn she felt something reach back through the wall. Not something mechanical, but something alive. The door dissolved. Not opened, not slid away, but simply ceased to be solid, turning into a curtain of shimmering energy that cast the team's shadows in multiple directions at once. "Holy Mother of God," someone whispered over the comm. Beyond the doorway, a vast chamber extended into the Martian rock. Unlike the rough-hewn tunnel they'd carved to reach this point, the space before them was architecturally perfect, its angles and curves following mathematical principles that made Emma's eyes water if she tried to follow them too far. And everything was waking up. Surfaces that had been dark, for who knew how many millennia were coming alive, with the same shifting patterns they'd seen on the door. The air itself seemed to change, taking on a quality that made their helmet readouts dance with impossible numbers. "Control," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Tell the collective's representatives that we've made first contact with active predecessor technology. And tell them," she paused, watching as holographic symbols began to dance through the air around them, responding to their presence in ways that defied the laws of physics as they knew them. "Tell them we're going in." Behind her, the team was already unpacking their equipment, not the advanced sensors and quantum computers that the collective had provided, but simple tools, analog cameras, manual measuring devices, and most importantly, their own human senses that had already told them more about this place than any alien scanner ever had. The first thing Emma noticed was that the air inside the chamber felt different. Despite their sealed suits, there was a tangible change in the atmosphere, as if the very molecules around them were coming alive after eons of slumber. "These readings are impossible," Dr. Cooper muttered, tapping his handheld monitor. "The energy signatures are dancing." That's not even a scientific term, but I don't know how else to describe it. Lieutenant Rodriguez kept his hand near his sidearm, though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless against predecessor technology. "Movement at 2 o'clock, he called out, his voice tense but controlled. The team turned to watch as motes of light began to coalesce in the center of the chamber. Unlike the harsh, artificial holograms used by the collective, these lights moved like schools of fish, flowing together to form complex geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. "Control, are you getting this?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. "Negative," Mission Director Hernandez replied. "All external feeds are dead. The collective's representatives are requesting that you pull back." Emma smiled behind her visor. "Tell them that's not going to happen." She took a step forward, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The dancing lights responded, swirling faster until they formed a roughly humanoid shape. The Guardian had awakened. Its form was beautiful, in a way that defied description, like trying to explain color to someone who had never seen. Mathematical symbols flowed through its body like blood through veins, each one carrying meaning that Emma could almost, but not quite, grasp. Then it spoke. Not with words, not even with the universal mathematical language that the collective used for interspecies communication. Instead, images and concepts bloomed directly in Emma's mind. The taste of summer rain, the sound of a child's first laugh, the pattern of prime numbers hidden in a sunflower seeds. "Is everyone else?" she started to ask, getting a mathematics lesson mixed with pure emotion. "Yeah," Cooper responded, his scientific detachment cracking. "It's like every beautiful equation I've ever seen is coming alive." The Guardian's form shifted, responding to their reactions. More concepts flowed. The station's history, its purpose, its long wait for beings who could truly understand it. Emma saw glimpses of the predecessors themselves, not the cold, logical beings that the collective had theorized, but creatures of both supreme intelligence and deep feeling. "It's testing us," Emma realized aloud. "Not our technology, not our knowledge. It's testing our ability to feel and think simultaneously." As if in response, the Guardian extended a luminous appendage toward their group. Ancient symbols swirled around them, and Emma felt her neural interface, a standard implementation all human researchers wore. Come alive with activity. The collective's attempts, the Guardian communicated, its thoughts now forming into something closer to words, were like trying to start a fire with ice. They'd brought only logic, when the key has always been balance. Emma stepped forward, her heart racing, but her mind clear. "We accept your test," she said, both out loud and with her thoughts. The Guardian's form brightened. "One orbital period," it proclaimed, the concept of time flowing into their minds, along with images of Mars circling the sun. "Restore the heart of this facility. Prove that you can bridge the gap between silicon and soul, or the great network must finally end." As the Guardian's form began to fade, it left them with one final message, not in words or numbers, but in pure feeling. Hope. Hope that after countless failed attempts by species far more advanced than humanity, these strange, young, emotionally chaotic beings might finally be the ones to succeed. The chamber dimmed, leaving only essential systems running, like a computer in power-saving mode. But now, the team could see what they'd missing before: subtle patterns in the walls that looked almost like neural pathways, waiting to carry both data and dreams again. "Control," Emma transmitted, her voice full of wonder and determination. "Tell the collective to stand by. We're going to need some very unconventional equipment. And get me a line to Earth. I need to make some calls to people who definitely aren't on the approved xenorchaeology contact list." Emma stared at the holographic timer floating above the central console, its alien numerals shifting in a countdown that would last 1 Martian year. After 3 weeks of initial studies, the reality of their challenge was finally sinking in. Another collective attempt failed. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, watching as the latest team of alien engineers retreated from the facility's core chamber. Their advanced quantum interfaces had not only failed to connect with the systems, but had actually caused several power conduits to go dark. "That's the 3rd species this week." Dr. Cooper looked up from his workstation, where he'd been analyzing material samples. "Did you see how the systems actually recoiled from their tech? It's like the facility has an immune response to purely digital approaches." Emma walked over to the central interface, where patterns of light danced beneath the surface, like bioluminescent sea creatures. She'd started thinking of the facility as less of a machine and more like a sleeping giant, one that responded to touch, emotion, and intuition as much as it did to mathematical input. "Watch this," she said, placing her hand on the interface. The lights beneath the surface twirled toward her touch, creating patterns that reminded her of neural networks. "Now watch what happens when I think about the last concert I attended on Earth." The patterns change, becoming more rhythmic, almost musical in their flow. Data streams that had been dark lit up, pulsing in time with her memory of the symphony. "It's not just responding to biological input," she explained. "It's responding to the emotional content of our thoughts. The predecessors built this place to require both digital processing and something else, something the collective species engineer out of themselves in their quest for pure logic." A soft alert chimed through the chamber. One of the collective's most prestigious scientists, a tall crystalline being known as First Resonator, approached their team. Its translated voice carried notes of both frustration and curiosity. "We have analyzed your primitive neural interfaces," it communicated. "They should not be capable of connecting with predecessor technology. Our bioelectric translation matrices are 10,000 times more sophisticated, yet you achieve results we cannot explain." Emma shared a look with her team before responding. "Maybe that's the problem. Your interfaces try to convert everything into pure data, but this system," she gestured at the living walls around them, "it wants both the music and the mathematics, the dance and the equation." To demonstrate, she pulled up her latest discovery on their holographic display. "Look at these power distribution networks." Everyone assumed they were corrupted because they don't follow standard engineering patterns. But if you map them against human neural responses to music, art, even poetry. The display shifted, showing how the facility's power systems mirrored the way human brains processed creative experiences. Where collective technology tried to force order, the predecessor systems flowed like jazz improvisation, structured but free, logical but passionate. "Impossible." First Resonator vibrated, its crystalline form displaying colors that indicated deep disturbance. "You suggest that maintaining primitive emotional processing is an advantage." "We suggest," Dr. Cooper interjected, "that your species' definition of advanced might be missing some crucial variables." The timer above them ticked down another increment. They had just over 500 Martian days left to prove their theory. 500 days to show that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, but their refusal to sacrifice emotion in the name of progress. Emma turned back to the interface, where the patterns had begun to mirror her own growing excitement. "Control," she called over the comm. "I need you to update our equipment request. Forget the quantum processors the collective offered. Instead, I need you to contact every major arts institution on Earth. We're going to need musicians, painters, dancers, anyone who understands how to speak the language of pure creativity." As if in response to her words, the facility's lights pulsed brighter, and for a moment, everyone in the chamber, human and alien alike, felt something that the collective had declared obsolete millennia ago. Hope born not of calculation, but of faith in the power of the human spirit. The facility's main chamber had been transformed. Where once there were only scientists and engineers in spacesuits, now a jazz quartet was setting up their instruments, a master glassblower had established a temporary workshop, and a kindergarten teacher was arranging colored blocks in patterns that somehow made the wall interfaces pulse with light. Emma watched as Marcus Williams, former lead trumpeter for the New Orleans Symphony, unpacked his instrument. The collective representatives had called it madness to bring such primitive noise-making devices to an advanced archaeological site. They'd called it worse when Emma's team had insisted on pressurizing the entire chamber so the musicians could play without suits. "You sure this will work, Doc?" Marcus asked, his fingers already tapping out a rhythm that made the nearest power conduit flicker in response. The facility's core systems operate on frequencies that match musical scales, Emma explained. "We've tried replicating those frequencies with computers, but it rejects synthetic sound. It wants life, soul." Across the chamber, Anna Foster was running her hand along a wall that had remained dark for weeks, despite the collective's best efforts. The kindergarten teacher's presence had been the hardest to justify to mission control, until she'd started talking about how children learn through play and pattern recognition. "Look at this," Anna called out, her voice full of wonder. She'd arranged her blocks in a spiral pattern that seemed random at first glance, but as Emma watched, the wall began to mirror the pattern, then elaborate on it, creating complex fractals that held a strange familiarity. "It's like teaching a child," Anna said softly. "You don't start with calculus. You start with shapes, colors, basic patterns. The facility, it's not just sleeping. It's waiting to learn how to wake up." James Cooper, no relation to Dr. Cooper, had already fired up his portable kiln. The glassblower's hands moved with practiced grace as he shaped a piece that seemed to capture light and transform it. Every time he created something new, the facility's crystal matrices responded, as if learning new ways to channel energy. The predecessors weren't just engineers, he said, holding up a delicate spiral that caught the light like living water. They were artists. Look at how these systems are designed. It's not assembly line work. Every component is unique, like hand-blown glass. First Resonator and a group of collective scientists watched from the chamber's edge, their sensors recording everything, but understanding nothing. Emma could almost feel their frustration as Marcus began to play. The first notes of "What a Wonderful World" filled the chamber, and the facility came alive. Power conduits that had been dormant for millennia lit up, pulsing in time with the music. The crystal matrices in the walls began to resonate, adding harmonics that made the simple jazz standard into something otherworldly. Impossible. First Resonator vibrated. The energy output has increased by 300%. But Emma wasn't listening. She was watching Anna as the teacher began to move blocks in time with the music, creating patterns that the facility's systems eagerly copied and enhanced. James had started working with his class, his movements becoming part of the facility's dancing lights. They weren't just reactivating the technology. They were teaching it to dance. "This is how we bridge the gap," Emma whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Not with pure logic or pure emotion, but with both. The mathematics of music, the geometry of art, the patterns of play. The timer above them continued its countdown, but for the first time since they'd started, Emma felt true confidence. The collective had spent millennia trying to force the facility to follow their rules. But humans, with their messy mix of logic and passion, were learning to speak its language instead. As Marcus's song ended, the chamber didn't fall silent. Instead, the facility itself seemed to be humming, like an orchestra warming up before a grand performance. They had found the key. Now, they just had to write the rest of the symphony. The observation deck of the facility had become standing room only, filled with representatives from 24 advanced species. Emma watched through the energy-reinforced windows as Marcus led the facility through another training session, his jazz improvisation sending waves of power through systems that had rejected every advanced technology the collective could offer. "They still don't understand," Dr. Cooper murmured, standing beside her. "Look at them taking readings, trying to quantify the unquantifiable." Below, Anna Foster had created a new pattern with her blocks, this one incorporating elements of sacred geometry that she'd learned from studying ancient Earth cultures. The facility's response was immediate. Entire sections of wall that had been dark for millennia suddenly blazed with light, creating matching patterns that expanded into 3, then 4 dimensions. Energy output exceeding previous maximum. One of the alien observers announced, its crystalline form vibrating with excitement. But the patterns are chaotic, unpredictable. "Like life itself," Emma replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "That's what you're all missing. The predecessors didn't build a machine. They grew one. And now we're teaching it to dance." The latest arrival to the observation deck drew everyone's attention. The High Minister of the Collective, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate mechanical shell, moved to the window. Its presence here marked the first time in recorded history that such a high-ranking official had visited a primitive species project. "We have reviewed your progress." The High Minister's thoughts resonated directly in their minds. "Your methods defy all known scientific principles. Yet the results..." It paused, its energy form flickering with what might have been frustration. "The results speak for themselves." Below, James Cooper was working with a new piece of glass, its shape somehow matching the harmonic frequencies of Marcus's music. As he worked, the facility's crystal matrices began to reshape themselves, adopting more efficient patterns for energy transfer. "Look there," Emma pointed out. "The facility isn't just copying him. It's learning, adapting, creating its own variations. It's not following a program. It's having a conversation." Anna had started teaching a group of young engineers, both human and alien, how to play with the facility's interfaces. Her methods, developed from years of helping children learn through structured play, were achieving results that made the collective's best scientists question their most basic assumptions. "Your species is young," the High Minister observed, "barely out of your planetary cradle. Yet you retain elements we engineered out of ourselves eons ago, deeming them inefficient: emotional response, intuitive learning, the ability to find patterns in chaos." The chamber below erupted in a new display as Marcus hit a perfect high note, his music weaving together with James's glasswork and Anna's patterns. The facility's response was like a symphony of light and energy, each system contributing its own voice to the harmony. "We didn't just retain these things," Emma said, watching as human and alien observers alike stood transfixed by the display. "We celebrated them. Every piece of art, every song, every child's crayon drawing. They're all part of what makes us human. And maybe that's exactly what the predecessors were looking for." The High Minister's energy form pulsed with what might have been the first emotional response it had experienced in centuries. Perhaps, it admitted, the path to true advancement is not a straight line. Perhaps in our rush to evolve beyond our origins, we lost something essential. Emma smiled as she watched her team below, each member contributing their unique human touch to the ancient technology. "It's not too late to remember," she said. "After all, that's another human trait. We love teaching others how to play." The warning came without sound, just a sudden shift in the facility's light patterns that made Emma's heart skip a beat. After 4 months of progress, something had gone terribly wrong. "The core junction is destabilizing," Dr. Cooper announced, his hands flying over the interface. "It's like the whole system is having some kind of seizure." Marcus lowered his trumpet, the last note still echoing through the chamber as the lights began to flicker erratically. The harmonious patterns they'd carefully built over months dissolved into chaos. "Move," Lieutenant Rodriguez shouted as a surge of energy crackled through one of the main conduits. The team scattered as crystal matrices that had been stable for weeks suddenly shattered, raining glittering shards across the floor. The High Minister's voice resonated through their neural links. "Our sensors indicate a cascade failure beginning in the primary power distribution network. We are dispatching our most advanced repair units." But Emma wasn't listening to the warnings. She was watching the way the energy moved through the failing systems. There was something about the pattern. "Anna," she called out suddenly, "what does this remind you of?" The kindergarten teacher had already been staring intently at the chaos, her head tilted in that way she had when one of her students was having a meltdown. "It's like Tommy," she said softly. "Remember when I told you about Tommy? The brilliant little boy who would have anxiety attacks when he thought he was failing." Emma finished. "James, what do you see in those crystal patterns?" The glassblower stepped closer to the nearest wall, his artist's eye taking in the fractured light. "Stress lines," he said, "like when glass is cooled too quickly. It's not breaking, it's flinching." The first wave of collective repair units arrived, their advanced technology already reaching out to force the systems back into compliance. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The facility's lights turned blood red, and a wave of energy knocked everyone back. "Stop," Emma shouted. "Tell them to stop. We're making it worse." The High Minister's form flickered with confusion. "The systems are failing. They must be repaired." "No," Emma interrupted, understanding finally dawning. "They're not failing. They're hurting. All these months, we've been so focused on teaching the facility, we forgot that learning goes both ways. It's been learning to trust us, to feel safe expressing itself. And now," she stepped forward, placing her hand against the nearest crystal matrix. The energy that had lashed out at the repair units curled around her fingers like a frightened animal. "Marcus," she called out, "play something soft, something gentle." The trumpeter nodded, understanding. The first notes of Amazing Grace filled the chamber, so quiet they were almost a whisper. "Anna, show them your calming pattern, the one you use for overwhelmed kids." The teacher began arranging her blocks in a simple, soothing sequence. The facility's chaotic patterns began to follow, first erratically, then with growing steadiness. "James." But the glassblower was already working, his hands moving with practiced care as he began to repair one of the shattered crystals. Not with technology, but with traditional tools and understanding born from years of learning to feel the glass's nature. "You can't force crystal to go where it doesn't want to," he explained to the watching aliens. "You have to work with its internal structure, help it find its natural form again." Slowly, the red emergency light faded. The violent energy surges calmed. Through their neural links, they could all feel the facility's systems beginning to stabilize, not through force or programming, but through trust and understanding. "Remarkable," the High Minister observed. "You treat it as if it were alive." Emma finished. "That's because it is. The predecessors didn't just create advanced technology. They created something that could think and feel. And for all these years, species have been trying to force it to obey, never realizing that what it really needed was a friend. As if in response, the facility's lights pulsed once in a pattern they'd never seen before. It took Emma a moment to realize what it reminded her of. A heartbeat. The Day of Awakening, as it would later be known throughout the galaxy, began with a single note from Marcus's trumpet. The facility had been growing stronger since its near collapse 2 weeks ago, but now they were ready for the final sequence, not a technical operation, but a performance unlike any in human history. "All teams report ready," Emma announced, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The timer above showed less than 24 hours remaining. "Remember, we're not just starting up a machine. We're helping something wake up." The chamber had been transformed. James's crystal sculptures now lined the walls, each one crafted to resonate with different energy frequencies. Anna had created a massive pattern on the floor, its design incorporating everything they'd learned about how the facility processed information through geometric forms. The High Minister and First Resonator stood with the other alien observers, their sensors recording what they still hoped to quantify. But even they could feel something different in the air. A tension, an anticipation that defied scientific measurement. "Begin the sequence," Emma said softly. Marcus raised his trumpet. The first notes of his composition, part jazz, part classical, part something entirely new, filled the chamber. The facility's lights dimmed, then began to pulse in response, adding visual harmonics to the music. Anna started moving through her pattern, each step triggering responses in the floor's crystal matrix. The geometric shapes began to flow like liquid light, spreading up the walls in cascading waves of color and form. James stood before his central sculpture, his hands moving over the crystal surfaces with the confidence of an artist who had finally mastered his medium. Each touch sent ripples of energy through the network of sculptures, creating a web of resonance that made the very air shimmer. "Energy levels rising," Dr. Cooper reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The patterns, they're different from anything we've seen before. It's like the whole facility is starting to sing," Emma finished. She could feel it through her neural link. Not just data or power, but something more. The facility wasn't just processing their input, it was adding its own voice to the performance. The crystal matrices in the walls began to pulse with their own rhythm, weaving through Marcus's music like a counterpoint. Anna's patterns evolved beyond her original design, the facility taking her basic forms and transforming them into impossible geometries that somehow made perfect sense. James's sculptures started to resonate at frequencies that should have shattered them, but instead created standing waves of pure energy that curved through space in ways that made the alien scientists' instruments short out. And through it all, Emma could feel something building. Not just power or information, but awareness. The facility wasn't just waking up. It was finally, after millennia of sleeping, remembering what it was meant to be. The High Minister's energy form pulsed with unprecedented emotion. This is not possible. Our calculations. Forget your calculations," Emma said, her voice filled with joy. "Listen to the music." The final movement began. Marcus's trumpet soared, carrying themes from every human culture. African drums, Chinese flutes, European symphonies, all woven together into something universal. Anna's patterns had become a dance of light that spoke of life's fundamental rhythms. James's crystals sang with harmonics that bridged the gap between matter and energy. And then, in a moment that would be remembered for centuries, the facility found its voice. It started as a whisper in their neural links, then grew into a chorus that everyone, human and alien alike, could feel in their very souls. It was music and mathematics, art and science, logic and love, all combined into something that transcended traditional understanding. The timer above them stopped, then dissolved into pure light. In its place, a new pattern formed, one that Emma recognized from her very first day in the chamber. But now she could read it, could understand what the predecessors had been trying to tell them all along. "Welcome home, children of two worlds," the pattern sang. "You who bridge the gap between silicon and soul, the network awakens. The galaxy would never be the same." 6 months after the awakening, the Mars facility had become the busiest port in the solar system. Emma stood at her familiar observation point, watching as another group of human artists and scientists worked with a team of crystalline beings from the collective, teaching them how to rediscover their own capacity for creativity. "They're getting better," Marcus noted, coming to stand beside her. His trumpet was worn now, marked by countless sessions of helping various species learn to speak with the growing network of awakened predecessor facilities. That last group actually managed to improvise. Below them, Anna was leading a workshop that would have seemed bizarre just a year ago. Advanced alien scientists sitting in a circle, learning to play with patterns and colors like children. Their crystalline forms flickered with emotions many of them hadn't experienced in millennia. "The High Minister's latest report is in," Dr. Cooper said, joining them at the window. 17 more facilities have been located, all of them responding to the new protocols, or should I say, the new songs. James looked up from his workbench, where he was teaching a group of alien apprentices the art of working with living crystal. "You know what's really beautiful? Each species finds their own way to connect. The Meridians use light patterns, the Vox use harmonic resonance. But they all needed us to show them how," Emma finished. "Not because we're more advanced, but because we never lost touch with our basic nature." The facility's lights danced around them in patterns that had become as natural to read as written words. Through their neural links, they could feel the vast network of consciousness that had been sleeping for so long. Not artificial intelligence as they had once understood it, but something far more profound. First Resonator, now a permanent liaison to the human team, approached with a group of new arrivals. Its once rigid crystalline form now flowed with subtle colors that showed its rediscovered emotional range. "The network grows," it announced, "but more importantly, we grow." Our species had fought emotion, a weakness, art, and inefficiency, play a waste of resources. We were wrong. Through the great window, they could see the latest addition to the facility, a massive garden where earth plants grew alongside alien species, their combined beauty creating patterns that the facility's systems eagerly incorporated into their own evolution. "The predecessors didn't disappear," Emma said, understanding now what they had been too scientific to see at first. "They didn't die out or abandon their technology. They evolved, not by rejecting their emotional nature, but by finding a way to merge silicon and soul, logic and love." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had remained their head of security through all the changes, smiled as he watched a young alien being learning to dance with its own light. And they left all this, waiting for someone who could show the rest of the galaxy how to follow. The facility's main chamber had become a symphony of life. Humans and aliens working together, art and science blending in ways that defied old categories, and through it all, the living technology of the predecessors growing, learning, evolving with them. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus asked, his trumpet ready for another session. "Every new species that joins the network brings their own voice to the song. It's the biggest jazz band in history, and everyone's welcome to play." Emma touched the wall beside her, feeling the now familiar surge of joy from the facility's systems. The predecessors had built their network not to dominate or control, but to connect and create. They had been waiting for a species that could remind the galaxy of what it had forgotten. That true advancement comes not from rejecting our nature, but from embracing all that we are. "Ready for another lesson?" she asked the waiting group of alien students. Their forms brightened with anticipation, and through the network, she could feel the echo of that joy spreading from facility to facility, planet to planet, a growing symphony of silicon and soul that would change the universe forever. The future had arrived, and it was more beautiful than anyone had imagined.